Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, we will go through the May 2024 Paper 2 section on approaches. This is for AQA psychology students following the UK curriculum. From the beginning, I've been getting a lot of requests to cover approaches. So today, let's practice on the approaches. As such, I've made videos previously also on writing answers, such as for the learning approach. You can check out those videos on my playlist. Today, we'll just take different types of approaches which have been asked for in the past paper. As always in this video, I will not only write model answers for your reference, but as I write these answers, I will keep explaining to you how to figure out how to answer the questions, what should be your strategy, what type of terminology to use, how much to limit the answer to, how to organize the answer well. So all tips I will be giving you as we go through different types of answers. Okay, let's begin. The first question is simply describe the ego and superego according to the psychodynamic approach. First thing you need to check out is the command term for any question. It's described, meaning that it is only AO1. There is no scenario, it's apparent that it isn't AO2. Also, they haven't asked for discussion or evaluation. They're definitely not looking for strengths or weaknesses. So the first thing to notice is it is purely a descriptive question. Next thing we should be looking at is the marks which have been assigned, 4 marks. 4 marks, how many concepts have been asked? 2. So it's very clear that each concept is worth 2 marks. That's 2 marks for ego, 2 marks for superego. When a concept is worth 2 marks, the first point you can give is the definition of that concept. As such, you're free to give any 2 points about the concept, but I always feel that starting with the definition makes the most sense, and that counts for 1 point, 1 mark. The next thing you can do is give any detail about the concept. The same thing has to be repeated for superego. Now let's think of different possibilities before I write one model answer and show you. After giving the definition of ego or superego, either you can give some examples of how they impact behavior. For example, how someone's behavior in a dilemma type of situation would get influenced by the ego or superego. Alternatively, you could compare between the two as compared to the superego. This is the principle that the ego works on, as compared to the ego. This is the principle that the superego works on. So, your second point could be something about the principles of working. Another possibility is to talk about the age at which these components of personality develop. So, at what age does the ego develop in the child? At what age does the superego develop? You could also talk about how they relate with the id, which isn't mentioned here, but what does the ego do when it interacts with the id versus how the superego tries to regulate the id. These type of points, like when it comes to details, so many possibilities are there. All are correct as long as you present them accurately. Okay, so I'll quickly write a model answer. There's not much in terms of frequently made mistakes in these type of answers. Usually students get it correct. One mistake that we've seen, students who are not very well prepared, they make, like who have not practiced past papers at all, they will have a very imbalanced approach towards the answer, in the sense that when 4 marks are allotted for 2 concepts, it's understood that you should give equal weightage to both concepts. But they end up writing too much about the first concept asked, because mostly they don't have clarity. Like they've learned so much about the ego in this case, and that's the first thing they're writing about. So they end up giving too much detail. By the time they run out of time and space, then they just touch upon the superego. So they don't write as much about the superego as they write about the ego, or they don't have time to cover it at all. If I write only about one concept, not the other, marks straight off become half, like 2 marks maximum is what I can get. Secondly, if I write very elaborately on one concept and just touch upon the other, for what I've written very elaborately, I'm not going to get credit. It's maximum 2 marks. So if I write 10 points about the ego, I'm not going to get more than 2 marks just because I've written 10 points. Ego has been restricted to 2 marks in this question. So I cannot compensate for not writing about the superego at all by writing too much about the ego. That's not possible. So these type of questions are very straightforward. 4 marks, 4 points, 2 about the ego, 2 about the superego. That's it. There's nothing more to think about. Okay, so I'm presenting a model answer. Right at the beginning, I want you to know your answer does not have to be exactly like mine. It does not have to be like something that you have to rote, learn, and write yourself. No. You just have to use it as a reference, and just whatever answer you're writing, I strongly recommend you pause this video, write your answer. After writing, just see is it comparable with what I'm writing here or not. So you can match the organization of your answer and the content, as I've suggested so many things. Is it matching with what I'm writing or not? It does not have to be the same. So we can say the ego is that component of personality which mediates between the demands for gratification by the id and morality by the superego. Okay, now out of all possible points that we can give after this, I would like to talk about the principle on which it works. So it works on the reality principle, striking a balance between the impulsiveness of the id and conscientiousness of the superego. So my first point has been the definition, that it is the mediating component of personality. Second has been about the reality principle. That's it. I won't write more about the ego. Just because I know a lot does not mean I write a lot. It's restricted to 2 marks. I have to write worth only that much. The superego is that component which directs behavior towards what is right while rejecting what is wrong morally. Okay, so we know superego is about right and wrong. That is the main definition. It works on the moral principle, seeking to sacrifice immediate gratification for what is the responsible action to be taken. Okay, like I said, there are many possibilities of what you could write when they develop, any examples of how they guide behavior and so forth. Just make sure what the concepts are is being put across clearly in your answer. Okay, let's come to the next question. Outline Wundt's method of introspection. Okay, again the command term is outline. It is purely AO1. There isn't any scenario again, so definitely not AO2. Also, okay, I'm sorry, my pen has stopped working here, so I'll just put it in text. So definitely this is entirely AO1 question, and there isn't any scenario I was saying, so no AO2 possibility. Also, outline is a command term that does not demand strengths or weaknesses, so no scope for AO3 either. Again, we have to restrict ourselves to what we have learned in the book. We just have to describe that. It is worth 4 marks. We know first we look at the command term, then we look at the marks. It is worth 4 marks, and a method has been asked for in this case. Method is akin to asking how something is done or the process of something. So ideally we should give some step-by-step process of how introspection is done. Again, there is a lot of possibility of what we can write because we have learned so much about introspection. but we must restrict ourselves to giving 4 points. We are not going to get credit for giving more than 4. So, first in our mind, we can just remember what is introspection. It is the method in which people have to think about different stimuli which are presented to them, and they have to present their thoughts, feelings without any censorship. Wundt used to use it in the laboratory to understand how the mind works, the structure of the mind, basically structuralism. So I'll write about that and show you. What is important here, and this is one mistake many students will make, is to deviate from the topic. Students will deviate from it. They are asking you firstly about introspection. They are not asking you about the larger school of structuralism. So, what was Wundt's idea behind structuralism, why he made it, or how it has been criticized by, say, behaviorists? Students can go all over the place. They are not asking you any of that. So, first thing is not to lose focus. They are strictly asking you how Wundt used to make participants perform introspection. That is all you need to cover from his theory. Students can go as far as to, like, maybe they can't remember what introspection is, or they just have learned it in 1 2 lines, they don't know how to present, so they can go as far as to write about uh, Wundt was the first one to establish a laboratory in psychology in the year 1879. Writing something that is irrelevant just because it's coming from the same larger topic is not going to get you marks. It's better not to write about that and waste time rather than to write it in the hope of getting marks. That's not how scoring works in AQA. So definitely write about introspection and make sure you're well prepared for the exam. So make sure whichever topics are in the syllabus, you've learned them thoroughly and you're able to attempt in the paper. Okay, so again, I'll write the sample answer. Please pause the video, write your answer, and then try to match it with what I'm writing here. Your answer does not have to be identical, but just see if the flow, how I go by step, and which content I give importance to when talking about introspection. Is it matching with what you are writing about? Anytime that this also becomes, no doubt we have to say how, but it's a concept after all, introspection. So we can always begin with one line of what it is and then explain how it is done. In that what it is also we are covering in a sense how it is executed. Introspection was the technique used by Wundt in his structuralism school to understand the parts, or you can say components, of the human mind. I have mentioned structuralism, but am I defining what structuralism is? No. I'm defining what introspection is with respect to structuralism. The purpose I'm talking about is of introspection only. So, no losing focus from the question. It involved having trained observers arrive at a controlled setting and being presented with various stimuli. The stimuli could include light, sound, heat of different intensities and quality. The observer's task was to report their experience of the stimulus presented without censorship, including their sensations, feelings, and thoughts in response to it. Okay, I've also underlined the key things that we need to focus upon when we are talking about this technique of introspection. So, this is exactly what is done in introspection. So, I've completely focused on how it is carried out, or what the method involves. That is all we have to write. And I have justified for 4 marks. In fact, maybe I have written for 5 marks. Whatever I've underlined, you can take it as worth 1 mark. So these are the type of things we need to talk about. Key is in introspection how they have to respond, about structures of the mind. That is because that is what Wundt wanted to investigate. So that is what we need to focus upon mainly. Okay, let's look at the next question. Outline one example of how neurochemistry influences behavior. In my opinion, this has been quite an easy paper because these are questions like they have so much that you can write about. So that's what makes it easy. Like in the sense, every question is so broad based, not very narrow in what it is asking for. That even if you haven't done anything very specific in that topic or really haven't gone into specific details, still there's so much that you can write about. So really scoring. Here, okay, coming back to this, they're saying outline one example of how neurochemistry influences behavior. Again, outline still AO1 only, and it is worth 3 marks. One example has been asked for. The most common mistake is to again stray from what the question is asking about. One example. There are just too many students who will give 2 or more examples. Like, see, one example coming to my mind right now is in phobia, how GABA influences behavior. It creates too much arousal when it is imbalanced. So, what students will do, for example, first they'll talk about GABA, then they'll say additionally, in depression, serotonin creates a problem. Also, in OCD, again, serotonin creates a problem. Some of them could talk about oxytocin. They have asked you for one example. That means you have to give one. One example of neurochemistry means how one neurotransmitter influences behavior. If you're going to talk about GABA, then serotonin, then oxytocin, you're talking about 3 examples. It's not going to give you credit. And in the process, you're sacrificing on the details that you could have given about one neurotransmitter. So instead of giving 3 sentences about one neurotransmitter, you're giving 3 sentences about 3. 2 of those sentences will be totally discarded by the examiner because they were not required. In the end, you're left with one sentence that you've written that is relevant. How many marks will you get out of 3 for making 1 point or writing one sentence? 1 mark. So don't deviate from what the question is asking and read the question very carefully before answering. Now, what 3 points can we give here for AO1? We just name a relevant example first. That is how you can think about it. So, just naming that one neurotransmitter can get you a mark, naming the neurotransmitter and the behavior which it impacts. For example, GABA impacts phobia. Then, of course, outline means to give further detail also. So, 2 details you can give. And it's very logical. If I'm saying GABA plays a role in phobia behavior, I can talk about exactly which behavior of phobia, like does it cause avoidance? We have seen so many features of phobia. So, does it cause avoidance? Does it cause the arousal which is there in phobia? What exactly does it do? So, just making it more specific and more detailed. Also, how it works, the mechanism of how it works, exactly what change is happening in the brain because of which these symptoms are taking place. So, how you can think about it is name, and in the 2 details, how it works. Any 2 points about how behavior is impacted by that particular neurotransmitter. Again, one mistake can be to, not read the question carefully, in the sense when neurochemistry is asked for talking about some structure of the brain. For example, the amygdala creates anxiety in phobia. But there's malfunctioning of the amygdala. Amygdala is a structure of the brain. It's a part of the brain. Neurochemistry means we are talking about chemicals of the brain, not parts of the brain. And chemicals are neurotransmitters. So I hope you've done your biological approach well, and from that you're able to relate neurochemistry with neurotransmitters. If you're not able to do that and you link it with genes or parts of the brain, definitely you'll be losing marks. Okay, so as always, please pause, write your answer, and then compare with mine. I think depression is also very popular among students as a schizophrenia. So you could choose to talk about serotonin or dopamine as long as you explain well. I'm just taking GABA because I know phobia is also very popular among students. An imbalance of GABA, the neurotransmitter GABA in the brain, can cause phobic behavior. Specifically, since GABA is the inhibitory neurotransmitter which regulates levels of arousals in the body, its imbalance can cause high levels of arousal. This is characteristic of the uh, excessive energy created in the body in the fight or flight response in the presence of a phobic stimulus. Okay, so what is key here is to first name very directly what you are going to talk about in the rest of the answer. Another way of thinking about it is directly addressing the question is very important. When they have phrased the question, they've left it to you any example of any neurotransmitter, any behavior that you can talk about. So the first thing to do is to specify to the examiner directly in your case which neurotransmitter and which behavior you are talking about. Don't leave the examiner guessing. Like some students' approach will be to just start talking about in phobia, there's a lot of arousal in the body. Then slowly they'll come towards the neurotransmitter. Why not directly have the first sentence just talking about what you're going to speak of ahead? So take that approach. What we call signposting, we've seen in so many videos before. It's not something that you have to do only for the 16 marker. It's something that you have to make a part of your general writing practice and use it in the shorter answers like we have done over here. So first thing is to name the neurotransmitter, also the behavior that you're going to address. Then like I said before, you can make it more specific. In phobia, there are so many behaviors or so many characteristics. So out of that, it is arousal that we are talking about when it comes to GABA. Also, exactly how GABA works or what problem it is creating because of which this behavior is seen is that its imbalance is triggering the fight or flight response. What I want you to notice in all the answers that I've been writing from the beginning till here is the use of terminology. Again, just because terminology is explicitly stated for the 16 marker in the marking table does not mean that is the only place where you have to use terminology. You have to use good terminology in all your answers. So that's why I've done this for the shorter answers as well. Okay, now finally, after all those AO1 answers, we have an AO2 answer, so something different. I'll just read out the scenario. For AO2, it's very important to read out the scenario very patiently in your mind before answering the question. Don't be in a haste, don't be panicky, don't think I have to just start writing, time is running out, I have to write as fast as possible. That's a very self defeating approach. You'll write, then you'll realize you missed out something in the scenario, you'll cancel, you'll write again. It is worth giving how much ever time is required to read the question peacefully first and then only start writing the answer. It's not worth writing the answer, then cancelling, then going back. There you end up wasting more time. So you think you're saving time by rushing into the answer, actually, you're going to waste more time, trust me. So read the question patiently and in the exam, always have a relaxed frame of mind. Just be composed. Okay, Karishma has very low self esteem Even though she achieved very high GCSE grades, she would like to be a lawyer. Although she is studying A levels, she has delayed her application to university because she does not think she will receive any offers. She does not think she is clever enough to study law. Explain why a humanistic psychologist would suggest that Karishma is not displaying congruence. This is completely AO2 answer. How do we know it is AO2? It's very obvious. The scenario is given. In the question, they've asked you about Karishma, the person in the scenario. So this is entirely AO2 worth 2 marks. But even if an answer is AO2, when we are thinking about it, the first thing, of course, we have to think about what content in the textbook it is related to. So our line of thought must always begin descriptively, and then we can narrow down to the situation given. So the moment they use the word humanistic psychology and they talk about congruence, before I write the answer again in a very composed way, I should just remember what comes under congruence. So when I think of congruence, I think of Rogers and I think about the concepts of ideal and real selves. That is what we've learned under congruence. I also think that the ideal and the real self need to match each other for congruence to be established, and like they're saying not congruence, so I've also learned about the concept of incongruence, in which the ideal and the real selves are not matching each other. So all of this must first come to my mind. I must remember the concepts and the sub concepts, then only I should start applying to the scenario. So now let me think about, okay, Karishma is in a state of incongruence as they're suggesting in the question. So, what is it about her ideal self that is not matching with the real self? Or I can go step by step into it. What is her real self like? Next, what is her ideal self like? Next, what is the mismatch between the two? So, this is how remembering the AO1 description helps me to answer the question, because once I remember, okay, these were the sub concepts under this concept, I know exactly what to look out for in the scenario. Also, it will make my answer writing better, because once I know exactly what to look out for, I'll answer also in those terms with good terminology, with relevant points. I will be step by step in my answer also, like I'm in my thinking. So the organization will be good. So it always helps to think carefully, plan carefully, and then write, rather than just jumping into the answer and writing a very jumbled answer which does not make sense. So for coherence, make sure your line of thinking is clear. Okay, so to begin with, step by step, what is Karishma's real self like? Real self is what the person actually is. Karishma's real self is what she has actually achieved. She has achieved very high GCSE grades. We are talking about her as a student right now. This means, as a student, she's an excellent student because she's got very high grades. Now, what's her ideal self like? She's applying to university. Her ideal self involves studying at a good university because she's like thinking about offers which could come from good universities. So her ideal self is a university student. Now, what is the mismatch? Given that she has these high grades, why is she having difficulty applying to the university? Because she thinks she is not clever enough to study law. This is the mismatch which is coming between her ideal and real self. In her perception, she does not have a good understanding of her real self. She feels that her real self is very far away from her ideal self because she thinks she's not a very good student. So, this is why incongruence is occurring in her. This is something we need to explain in 2 points. Generally, I avoid saying 2 sentences, though I have said it earlier in this video. It's more about 2 points that you need to give, one about ideal self, one about real. And of course, you'll conclude off with the mismatch. It can be both the points you put in the same sentence or you're putting in 10 sentences also. In the exam, length is immaterial, or the examiner is not going to count how many words or sentences you have used. That is just for organization. They're going to look at the points which you are making. So make sure you make 2 relevant points here. Okay, please pause the video, write your answer, and then compare with mine. Charisma, ideal self, is that of a university student studying law. Though her real self is a competent student since she has achieved very high GCSE grades, there is a mismatch between the real and ideal self as she perceives herself to be not clever enough to study law. This is optional, the last sentence, if you want to write, or you can skip it. Thus, she is not displaying congruence. What I want you to note in this answer is I only talk about charisma because it is EO2. I don't give any generic points. Many students, regardless of how much is explained to them, they will talk about generally real self means what the person really is, and that also they'll give a tautological definition. And ideal self means what the person aspires to be. They'll talk about person, the person, one individual. They'll not talk about charisma in the situation. So if you're not going to talk about the character in the situation, why do you think they have presented that character if they don't want you to talk about it? Also in the question, so directly they're asking you, why is charisma not displaying congruence? So when they ask you about charisma, why are you talking about some person or some individual hypothetically? Why are you not directly talking about charisma? Also, throughout the answer, you will notice I have used wording from the question. University student, law, high GCSE grades, not clever enough. Are these my ideas? Are these my examples that probably this is what charisma is thinking? No, this is what is given in the situation. So, this is how we address application questions. By looking at what is in the situation, taking wording from them, talking about those things only, not talking about hypotheticals. The next question, although they have numbered it separately, it is relating to this one only. Explain how humanistic psychologists might help charisma to receive congruence. Again, entirely AO2 for 3 marks because it's still about that scenario which was given previously. So it's still about a scenario. And again, in the question, also directly, they have asked for what has to be done with charisma. So they have made it very clear that it's about her. Now, before writing, same strategy like we had for the previous question. Humanistic psychologist helping someone. What have I learned about therapy that has emerged from humanistic psychology? So, I have learned about client centered therapy, which has been proposed by Rogers. Rogers has spoken about actually a lot of concepts which are used in client centered therapy, including things like unconditional positive regard, empathy, good listening skills of various types, acceptance, congruence, genuineness of the counselor. But I believe most of you all must have learned about unconditional positive regard. That is most emphasized in AQA. So I'll restrict myself to that also because it's worth 3 marks. There's a limit to how much we can write about. So first, definitely I'll specify that client-centered approach by Rogers is what can be used to deal with charisma. Start talking about charisma right from the first sentence because I don't want to stray away from AO2. Then I will talk about how unconditional positive regard can be used to create that atmosphere in which she stops doubting herself. We saw them mention something about low self esteem in the previous question. So, to help her overcome that problem of low self esteem, so that she can perceive her real self to be what it truly is rather than the false judgment that she has created about herself. So, those are the things I'm going to talk about. Because it's worth 3 marks, I'm going to give 3 points. In terms of mistakes that students would make, again the same mistake because the question is just like the previous. talking about some person, some individual, someone who was cured or can be cured with client centered therapy. They don't want to know about some person, they want to know about charisma. Also, giving general examples like if someone has this problem, then this can be done in client centered therapy. Why ifs and thens? Why hypotheticals? This is charisma, this is her problem, they've laid it out for you. Why are you thinking about someone else or something else? Why think in general terms? So, the most common mistake is to give generic answers, which must be totally avoided to score on AO2 question. As always, please pause the video, write out your answer, and then compare with mine. An active learning approach is the only thing which can help you to score. Passively, just looking at the video, just listening to what I'm saying, or reading what is on the screen, especially while looking at the mobile phone simultaneously, is not going to help you to achieve grades. When someone gives you the answers, like when I'm giving right now, everything seems so easy. Yeah, what's the big deal in this? I'll write it. Writing is the challenge. Listening is not the challenge. So, till you face the challenge and practice through it, you're not going to be able to write good answers. Trust me. Everything seems very easy till you have to go and actually write in the paper. So when you want to practice for the exam, make sure you're doing writing practice. In the exam, you won't have to sit and listen to what someone else is saying and think in your mind, yeah, I've understood, or no, I haven't understood. Right? That is not what is expected from you. So that type of practice is not going to help you. Listening practice is not going to help you to write. So make sure you're being proactive whenever you're watching any video or you're learning from any teacher. Okay, what we can write here is a humanistic psychologist would use client centered therapy proposed by Rogers to help charisma achieve congruence. Unconditional positive regard will be given to charisma to make her feel accepted regardless of what she thinks about herself, helping boost her self esteem. The atmosphere created in this way will help her truly perceive her real self, as it will lead her to accept herself, resolving any doubts about her being not clever enough to study the law. How I have organized this answer, you can think of it as first I have named the therapy which is used to help cases like charisma. Then I have giving Rogers' name is not compulsory, but I'm sure most of you remember under humanistic therapy, the main theorists Rogers and Maslow. So it's a good idea to name. Then I've given that specific technique which is used as such. Humanists, of course, don't call these techniques. We can say the strategy or the approach which they take. I have mentioned that, of course, applying to charisma throughout. So, first I've named the therapy, then given the approach which is adopted within it, and then spoken about how it will resolve charisma's problem specifically, like how it will get her to her real self. Okay, now coming to the last question, it's an 8 marker. Moment students see 8 marks. They feel it has to do with discussions, strengths, and weaknesses. Don't ever jump to conclusions by looking at the marks. Let's see the question and you'll understand what I'm saying. Outline how behaviorists explain learning through the process of operant conditioning. Compare operant conditioning with social learning. The command term is outline and compare. It's totally AO1 for 8 marks. There is no mention of any discussion or evaluation that has to be made in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So, though it is having high marks, it is not an AO3 type of answer. Now, coming to how are these 8 marks distributed? Outline how behaviorists explain learning. Okay, fortunately, my pen is working again. Now, when they're talking about behaviorists, only behaviorist approach they want you to outline. That also specific to operant conditioning. Okay, specific to operant conditioning, they want you to talk about behaviorist approach. They have asked you in the next part to compare this with social learning, but have they asked you to generally outline what social learning is? No. So that is what you have to keep in mind. That's why it's so important to read the question carefully. What many students will do in this answer, very common mistake. One paragraph about operant conditioning, one paragraph about social learning, assuming that that is the comparison which is seen. There are too many problems with that approach. One, when you're writing a separate paragraph on operant conditioning and a separate one on social learning, that is not how a comparison question has to be answered. Compare means direct comparison. You can think of it as point by point comparison. One point from this approach versus a relevant point from that approach. Another point from this approach, another relevant point from that approach. Corresponding points have to be given. Writing two separate paragraphs is what is suitable for outline or explain type of command term, not for compare. So, firstly, you have to give a head on or a direct comparison between the two approaches. Secondly, when they've asked you to outline the operant conditioning approach, it just means that, if they wanted you to outline social learning, they could have included it there only, outline operant conditioning as well as social learning. It means strictly they want you to outline only operant conditioning and not social learning. Okay, so for what concept, what command term is given, follow that command only. Don't mix the commands. Comparison is between operant conditioning and social learning. Outline is not for both. Outline is only for operant conditioning. So you have to do exactly what the question says to score marks. If you do something different from what the question is asking you to do, you cannot score marks on any answer. Now you can think of it as the 8 marks which are given. 4 marks is for outlining operant conditioning. 4 marks is for comparing operant conditioning with social learning. For these type of answers, given they are long answers, it's good to plan or have an outline before you start writing the answer. Again, to avoid later like making mistakes, cancelling, going back and making a mess of the answer. To avoid that, it's just better to outline which points you're going to give. When it comes to operant conditioning, I think it's one of the most straightforward questions. As I was mentioning earlier, I think this has been quite a simple paper. The moment we see operant conditioning, I think it's the easiest theory in behaviorism. It has to be about rewards, punishments, and within rewards or reinforcement, I'm sure most of you have learnt about two types. Of course, there is negative positive reward and negative positive punishment. But mostly, I have seen students learning negative positive rewards and negative and only punishment, not negative positive. Like that is something they don't bifurcate. So those are the definitions you can give. Like for 4 marks, if you give firstly what is the principle of operant conditioning in terms of reward and punishment, that can be 1 mark. 1 mark for saying what's negative reinforcement, 1 mark for saying what's positive reinforcement, and 1 mark for saying what's punishment. So that's 4 marks that you can achieve. As simple as that. Of course, you could name Skinner. You can talk about something like Skinner's rat experiment as long as you're focused on the question. How they explain learning through operant conditioning? Yes, Skinner's rat experiment with the food pellets or the electric shock is very relevant to this. Like I said, but does it explain about learning? If you give it from an approach of, I just want to outline how Skinner did his classic experiments, and you don't relate what the rats were doing with how they learned, how like rewarding and punishing them led to certain responses that they gave, like jumping on the liver, then it won't count. So again, focus has to be right. You are explaining how learning takes place because of rewards and punishments. You're not talking about rewards and punishments for their own sake, or Skinner's experiments on operant conditioning for their own sake, or how they classically contributed to psychology. That's not what they want to do in this question. Secondly, coming to comparing operant conditioning and social learning, here especially it's very important to make an outline, because like I said, there has to be a direct comparison point by point. That is what you can miss out on if you don't make the outline. So again, if you don't make the outline, you end up giving one separate paragraph on operant and one separate on social learning, which will not count for comparison. For 4 marks comparison, you can think of 2 points on which you can compare both the approaches, because you'll take 1 point, write one uh, sentence on operant conditioning from that, and one sentence on social learning from that. That will be worth 2 marks. Second point, you'll take again one line on operant conditioning, one line on social learning. So that will be 2 marks. So that's how you can score 4 marks. If this is confusing, I'll show you concretely. When it comes to operant conditioning, it's about reinforcement. Social learning also includes reinforcement. So of course, that's the first point which comes to mind. Like, this is the point on which we can compare both. Now, one more thing. Comparison means by itself similarities or differences or both. Does not have to be difference only. Many students, when they say compare, they think it means contrast. Contrast is about differences. Comparison can involve similarities also. I will give you more possibilities, but the most obvious points which come to mind, one, reinforcement. This is a difference point. So that type of comparison. When it comes to operant conditioning, reinforcement is always direct. But when it comes to social learning, reinforcement is what we call indirect or vicarious. So that could be one straightforward point comparing the two. What I want you to observe is how I am not giving different points, like about the two approaches. So I'm not saying operant conditioning is about reward, social learning is about watching and imitating behavior. I have to use the same standard or parameter to compare them. I'm talking about reward or reinforcement in the case of operant conditioning. So even in the case of social learning, I have to talk about reinforcement only. Observation, imitation, modeling becomes something else. It's not relevant to reinforcement, which we are talking about right now. So just be relevant, just stick to the topic. Another point for comparison can be about the role of mediational processes, or what we say mental processes. Operant conditioning absolutely rejects mental processes. It focuses only on outward behavior, just like anything else in behaviorism does. Whereas when it comes to social learning, these mediational processes which come in between learning of a behavior and performing it, like attention, memory, motivation, and reproduction ability. These are the things which actually determine learning. I have taken 2 points of difference. You can take similarities, as I pointed out earlier. Both social learning and operant conditioning, for example, give a lot of importance to how reinforcement encourages learning. Like, I took two forms of reinforcement, two different forms to contrast them. But if we take reinforcement principle as a whole, that is common to both. So both talk about how reinforcement of behavior can cause its repetition. That is one similarity. Also, social learning approach, if we see, it is partially behaviorist in nature. So Bandura has been partially behaviorist, and he's combined it with the cognitive approach. So of course, some behavioral principles are common in both. For example, both make use of controlled experiments in their study. In this question, if you see, they've asked to compare operant conditioning with social learning. They haven't told you that you have to only compare how learning takes place in each or fundamental concepts in each, which means you can talk also about the research approaches used in them, the research methods used. You can talk about Bandura and Skinner's contributions to the approach. Like, they've just kept it very broad. That's why you can talk about how controlled experiments are used in both approaches. Probably you can give an example also in how in Skinner's approach there has been the use of rats and pigeons for those classic experiments, and how Bandura has done the classic Bobo doll experiment. You could also contrast between the way they have used experiments, in the sense you can give difference. Skinner has typically made use of animals for his experiments. Why? Because his focus has been on observable behavior, and that's why he felt that there's no difference between how animals and humans learn. Like, he felt extrapolation is possible. Bandura, because he included mediational processes, he believed that experiments should be done with humans. That's why his studies always involved human participants. In fact, if this is a type of comparison you're giving, like I just elaborated so much on two different types of participants used and what's the justification for using animals versus humans, then you can give even 1 point for 4 marks because it's going to be detailed enough. So consider that also, like how much elaboration you're doing to see whether you need to give 1 or 2 points to justify 4 marks. Right now, I'm just taking a very simple, straightforward answer, which I think most students will agree with. The little advanced students who are there, they can think about my other lines of thinking, which I have presented. Okay, so let's look at a model answer for this one. And this is going to be the last question for this video. Okay, first to begin with outlining operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is the principle pioneered by Skinner, which suggests that behavior is learned from the consequences that follow. Behavior that is rewarded is repeated. Behavior that is punished is not repeated. Okay, so here I've just explained the general principle. That's my first point. So, learning in this approach involves the use of processes like positive and negative rewarding or reinforcement, and punishment. Now, very important, this is a minute thing about the content but very frequently seen. Most students do not grasp the difference between negative reinforcement and punishment. If that is the case with you, you'll end up writing an answer which does not mean the right thing. Negative reinforcement, it's a type of reinforcement or reward. What is the general principle of operant conditioning? Whatever is rewarded is repeated. So if I'm using negative reinforcement, how can it be punishment? How can it stop behavior? But many students will explain negative reinforcement and how it stops behavior from occurring. Doesn't make sense, right? It contradicts the principle. So negative reinforcement is about taking away something unpleasant that leads to encouragement or repetition of behavior. First, I don't have that much scope in this video to explain the whole theory, but first make sure your base concepts are correct before you can write these type of answers. That's why learning is also as important as answer writing. First learn, know all your concepts thoroughly, then do a lot of practice. Okay, so here what we can say is, as I said, the focus has to be on answering the question. I'm not explaining positive reinforcement or anything just for its own sake. I'm explaining all of this in relation with learning. I must not lose sight of that. Positive punish, positive reinforcement causes repetition of behavior by providing a pleasant consequence for behavior. Negative reinforcement causes repetition of behavior by taking away an unpleasant consequence for behavior. Finally, punishment causes extinction of behavior by applying an aversive, or again you can say unpleasant consequence to behavior. That is all we need to write for 4 marks. So here we have shown how learning takes place, because in which case behavior will be repeated, implying that learning will be there, and in which case behavior will not be repeated, implying that learning will not take place, or learning will take place not to do that behavior. Most students will just say positive reinforcement applies, giving pleasant consequences. They won't talk about whether behavior will be repeated because of that or it will get extinguished because of that. That is how the answer does not relate to learning. They are just describing what rewards and punishments are. That is not what they are asking for. Okay, now many students feel, is this enough for 4 marks? My teacher told me write long answers. Write as long as you can. Give a lot of length to the answer. Most students who come from other boards, then they come into AQA. I'm not talking about EdXL and those boards, not international, who come from local boards into international curriculum. I'm not saying all of them, but most of them, they are the ones who have this belief that we have to write very long answers to get good marks, because that is what was taught in the local boards. Just write as much as you can. Please know that international curriculums do not work like this. Accuracy is important. Meeting parameters like terminology, clarity, coherence, these are important to gain marks, not the length of the answer. That's immaterial. As long as you're covering the points, someone has a writing style in which they can cover so many points in just 1 or 2 sentences. They have a lot of brevity in writing. Other people require a lot of sentences to make those few points. They have an elaborative style. Style does not matter, length does not matter, content matters. That's why when we are outlining, when we are planning the answer, we focus on the points. We don't focus on the length, oh, I have to write 1 paragraph, I have to write 10 paragraphs. That is not how we lay out the answer. That's not important. So if you have those beliefs, please start getting rid of them, because they might cause problems for you. Be focused on giving points, like become focused on what is required in this curriculum. So let's write the next paragraph also. And yes, I suggest breaking the paragraph at this point, since 2 questions have been rolled into one. So why not have 2 separate paragraphs indicating that one paragraph is answering one question, the other is answering the other. Just be kind to the examiner who has to check your answers. Just empathize with them. They have too many answer sheets to check. Please make things as easy as them as possible, because when you just put everything in one paragraph and you just join everything together, they have to put a lot of effort to separate what you're writing. Reading becomes a task. So don't make it so difficult for them. Wherever possible, just simplify things. Okay, so now also signposting, as always, we can say in comparison with this social learning approach, since I've written about operant conditioning first, I'm addressing like that in comparison with social learning. You can go about it the other way around also. Operant conditioning involves the use of direct rewards for learning. That is, the individual performing desired behavior is directly rewarded. In the social learning approach, there is use of vicarious reinforcement. In this type of indirect reinforcement, the model being observed is rewarded, to indirectly make the observer feel reinforced and encouraged to carry out that behavior. Now here you can see I've given one point of contrast which is about the nature of rewards, but I've used so many sentences. So that's what I mean by length doesn't matter. Here I wanted to write elaborately to be able to explain my point. Maybe the same point you can give it with brevity or precision. Doesn't matter as long as your point makes sense. The second point was going to be about the focus of behavior. We can say in operant conditioning, only overt or observable behavior is focused upon for learning, whereas in social learning, both cognitive behavior, cognitive processes, and observable behavior are given importance for learning. That is, it is assumed that mediational mental processes like attention, memory, uh, reproduction ability, and reason or motivation contribute towards successful outward imitation of modeled behavior. Okay, so here you can notice for this point, I have written a shorter sentence for operant conditioning, longer one for social learning. Length does not matter. Also, in this answer, my previous paragraph is much shorter than this one. Second paragraph is longer. Again, because length does not matter. I really want to drive in that point to your head. Your focus should never be on length, number of words, number of sentences. Those are superficialities. Focus on the points that you're making to get marks. Okay, so that is what I have for this video today. I know most of you also want research methods because most requests I get for approaches followed by research methods followed by AS content. So yes, I will try to solve May 2024 for the research methods as well. If you're looking for more AS content from May 2024, I had covered the social influence section on paper 1 as far as I remember. Then I just got very busy with classes. I was not able to follow up with the memory, psychopathology, attachment type of solving. Though I had intended to do that. I'll try to do that as well. I just don't know how much time will permit me to put up. But because approaches requests keep flooding in, so I decided to do one on approaches. I will upload these answers on my website and I'll link the answers in PDF format to my description box and pinned comment below. So if you want to download a copy of these answers for referencing, not for rote learning, you can download them from my website. If you have any comments, any feedback about this video, or you want to give me suggestions on what future videos I should make, or if you have any doubts about what is covered in this video, please leave those doubts, comments, suggestions in the comment section below. If you contact me personally for what I have covered in the video, you will not receive a response. The personal contact number and email ID that I share below, it's only if you want to contact me for personal tutoring. Yes, I take online classes for AQA psychology and for other international boards as well. So if you want to schedule your classes with me, please contact me personally. Else, please restrict your interaction to the comments box below. I do read what is in the comments, and if relevant question suggestions are made, I do respond to them as well. Okay, so hopefully I will see you soon in another video. Keep visiting my previous videos. I have a proper playlist on AQA in this channel itself, and you can visit my website for a lot of downloadable free PDF content of whatever I cover in the videos and some additional material as well. Okay, so see you soon. Keep preparing your best. AQ is very extensive compared to other boards. You really need to study daily, regularly. I won't say you have to study hard or it's difficult, but daily, regular practice is needed. Also, considering that May is coming close, it's not too far off. So keep working sincerely, and I will see you soon again. Goodbye.